The Irish have won 5 straight games heading into the bye week, but there is still plenty to prove down the stretch. From Mike Denbrock's offensive tweaks to Marcus Freeman's evolution as a head coach, we're answering your biggest questions in today's mailbag.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. It is Friday, October 24th, so happy Friday, everybody. And thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail. Because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. And before we dive into the questions, I wanted to remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And look, even though it's the second and final bye week of the season, we still got plenty to talk about in today's mailbag. Thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. I got a ton this week. And we're going to start with what Notre Dame needs to clean up offensively and how Notre Dame stacks up compared to the other top teams in college football. We're also going to get into how Mike Denbrock can solve the short yardage issues and whether Notre Dame can not only make the playoff, but potentially host a first-round game. Then we'll talk some bigger picture stuff like Marcus Freeman's growth from year 1 to year 4, how the roster is shaping up for next weekend, or next season, I should say, and where Jadarian Price stacks up amongst Notre Dame's best backs of the past 25 years. Finally, we're always going to wrap it up with some fun ones, including your rooting guide for this weekend and the rest of the college football season, and my favorite Notre Dame football moment of all time. So, a lot to get into. Let's get into our first question here from @DadDomerNM, a mailbag regular, always comes in with some good questions here. So, the first one is, of the current AP top teams, which teams do you think would be favored to beat Notre Dame on a neutral site? This is a really good question, and I had to call in our resident Vegas expert, Tim Murray, for some support, and he said that Ohio State would definitely be favored. After that, there's a case to be made for and against a bunch of other teams, but here is our reference point. Ohio State is ranked first in the country. Indiana is right there behind them at number 2. DraftKings odds makers have Ohio State as a 7.5-point favorite over IU on a neutral field, which is what we're probably going to see in the Big Ten Championship later on this season. After that, there's some debate. Oregon might be favored over Notre Dame. It might be a pick'em. Alabama might be favored. It might be a pick'em. Same with Indiana. Other than that, other than Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, and Indiana, I feel pretty confident that Notre Dame would be favored by every other team on a neutral site. It would be a slim margin, right? They're not going to be favored by a touchdown over Georgia, but I think Notre Dame would be favored. And at worst, it would be a pick'em. Like, I don't think any of the other teams that I have not mentioned would be favored over Notre Dame. And I can confidently say that Notre Dame is capable of beating everyone in the country. It'd be very hard to beat Ohio State. They look really, really good right now. But hell, last year, they looked unstoppable when they won the national championship. But that same team lost to a bad Michigan team at home. So stranger things have happened. Stranger things will continue to happen the rest of the season because that's just how college football works, especially this time of year. But even though I think Notre Dame is capable of beating everyone in the country, they could lose to a lot of teams too, right? They need to be more effective at getting after the quarterback with 4 guys. They just lost their best defensive tackle for at least the rest of the regular season. We'll see if Gabriel Rubio is able to come back if Notre Dame were to make the playoffs. Christian Gray just gets flat out abused against good wide receivers. And then on offense, they're obviously very dynamic, but they leave too many points in the red zone. They struggle in short yardage sometimes, and they have a redshirt freshman quarterback who has shown that he can get a little bit nervous. He can press in certain moments. But that's like nitpicking, right? Because Notre Dame has looked really good ever since the halftime, really since, the halftime of the Purdue game. They've been on a tear as of late, but we need to see them play against elite competition. Unfortunately, we're not going to see that until they make the playoff, if they're able to do so. They looked good in some phases against Miami. They looked really good on offense against Texas A&M. They were terrible on defense in that game. That's why they lost, and obviously the botch snap on the field goal. But this Notre Dame team can play with anyone, and in this season of college football, where it looks like anyone can beat anyone, Notre Dame just has to get in the dance, and they're going to have a legitimate shot at winning a national championship. All right, next up, @Kellen Carney, 810. Do you believe it's possible for Notre Dame to climb up the rankings enough to not only make the playoff, but host a playoff game? at this point, I would advise everyone to just pump the brakes a little bit, because even though it's highly likely that Notre Dame will make the college football playoff as a 10-2 team, it's not a lock. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later on. But as for a home game, it's possible, right? Ohio State hosted a playoff game last season as a 10-2 team who did not even make it to a conference championship game. That is what Notre Dame would be if they're able to win out this season. I would still say it's unlikely as of now. Again, who knows what's going to happen over these next 5 weeks, but there would need to be a lot of chaos in front of Notre Dame in order for them to move all the way up into the top 8. And as much as I'd love to see Notre Dame host another game, let's be honest, it could be fun to go to a unique environment. It'd be harder to win, obviously, but imagine Notre Dame playing at Ole Miss, right? I'd love to go to the Grove, even if it's in late December, right? It's still pretty warm in Mississippi that time of year, so that could be an awesome environment, and I think Notre Dame would win that game. Imagine Notre Dame at Oregon in Autzen for a playoff game. That would be electric, and I've actually never been inside a game at Autzen. I've been on campus at Oregon. It's a really, really pretty campus. The stadium looks really cool. It's not big. It's really weird being in there when it's empty. You're like, this is it. But man, I've heard it gets really loud there, so that would be awesome. If Notre Dame were to go back to Georgia, I still say that game in 2019 on the road in Athens was the best college football environment I've ever experienced. So if they go on the road, yeah, it's going to be a tough task to win that game, but I think it would be an awesome experience, and that's why these home playoff games are so great. So in most of the potential brackets I've seen, Notre Dame would have to play on the road in the first round playoff if they were to make it, but I'm kind of all for it, right? Last year was great when Notre Dame got to host Indiana. They won that game. If they're able to host another one, that'd be great too. I'd probably be there in South Bend for it, but I'm open to playing a tough road game in the college football playoff. Let's see what this team is made of, right? All right, we got another one here. This one is from @ClarkMartin-T40. Do you think Pitt is a trap game with how they have played against other opponents as of late? By definition, it is not a trap game because it's not going to sneak up on anyone, or at least it shouldn't, right? They are clearly the best team left on the schedule, at least in my opinion. I guess maybe you could make a case for Navy because they're undefeated, but Navy was undefeated and ranked last year when Notre Dame played them, and they completely folded under the pressure, and I have no reason to think this year's game would be any different other than maybe Navy wouldn't fumble the ball 5 times or just throw the ball to Notre Dame and pretend or act like they've never even played a serious game of football before, because that's what it felt like last year. I think they'll probably come out with a little bit more fire, try to clean things up a little bit, but Notre Dame is just so much better than Navy. They're so much more talented. They're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. Same as it's always been, outside of a few lean Charlie Weiss years, but Notre Dame should smoke them. So, look, Pitt is the real tough test left on the season. I know Stanford just won over Florida State, but I still think they're terrible. Boston College is bad. If Syracuse had Steve Angeli, that game would be a lot more interesting. But Pitt is an interesting team because they had a tough start to the year. They lost to West Virginia. They lost to Louisville. They didn't get blown out in either game. West Virginia's not very good. Louisville looks like a pretty good team, especially after that win against Miami, but that's kind of like the Jeff Brom special. He gets one of those big upset wins a year. But Pitt has a quarterback now that they really like, and they always had a talented defense. So that is a game where I think Notre Dame might really miss Ashton Craig. They're going to miss Billy Schrouth more likely than not. I don't expect Schrouth to be back for that game. And I don't love that they play Pitt on the road the week after the Navy game, right? Because you spend a whole week preparing for the triple option and all that stuff on defense, and then you go back to a regular offense. And usually there is an adjustment period. We have seen that before in the past where Notre Dame teams come out slow the week after they play Navy. So that could be the case here. And just look, historically, Pitt has been a pain in the ass for Notre Dame. Think back to 2012 when Notre Dame had to go into triple overtime. They honestly should have lost that game. They end up winning on somewhat of a miracle. Their undefeated season survives, right? Think back to 2018 when Ian Book needed to hit Miles Boykin for a go-ahead touchdown pass late in the fourth quarter, and that Pitt team wasn't very good. So that's just the nature of the game. Pat Narduzzi would love nothing more than to spoil Notre Dame's season, but again, Notre Dame is way more talented than Pitt. They should still win that game by double digits, and because that is like the last big game left, it's on the road. It might even be at night. I don't think they've announced a kickoff time for that one yet, but that's going to be a big game. I expect Notre Dame to come out there and be ready for that. So it's not a trap game, but it could be a tricky game. All right, we'll answer one more in this segment before we move on to segment 2. And this one comes from Dan Benson, who provides an opinion first before he gets into his question. He says, obviously the solution to the short yardage issues is not as simple as run the ball. Love and Price, this is according to Dan, Love and Price aren't short yardage back. Their skill sets favor having more vertical space. So how can Mike Denbrock scheme up short yardage in short field situations given Love and Price's skill sets? More tight ends, 2-back sets, quick throws, tush push with a bunch of question marks. A lot of good ideas here, lots of good thoughts here. I would push back on the idea that Jeremiah Love is not a short yardage back. Like, he can be very effective in short yardage, as we saw in the Orange Bowl last year when he had like the greatest 2-yard run in the history of football. And he had a couple 4th and short conversions against Texas A&M. He had one this past week against USC. I think the bigger issue for Notre Dame is they got to stop being stubborn in inviting people in the box. I mean, they had walk-on lacrosse player Matt Jeffrey as a lead blocker in some plays. And I like that when it's like the middle of the field and you're trying to confuse the defense, right? They don't expect a slot wide receiver to come in there and be the lead blocker in the A gap. But when it's 3rd and short and it's 4th and short and you bring in 12 personnel and you just stack it, everything at the line of scrimmage, you know what you're doing? You're telling the defense to do the same thing. So then everyone is all packed in, and Notre Dame has not won enough in those situations. So I don't think they need to change a ton. I would prefer if in 3rd and short or 4th and short, they split out 4 wide. Have 3 wide receivers split out, have a tight end split out, and hell, be obnoxious about it. Literally put 2 of them on one sideline, 2 of them on the other, and really force the defense into conflict, okay? And if that's the case, if you're able to do that, you force the defense to make a decision. Are they going to cover all 4 of those guys on the outside with just 4 straight-up defenders, and then they have 7 guys in the box? Okay, well, now you have 4 one-on-one matchups. CJ Carr gets to pick the one that he likes the best, and whether that's Will Pauling running an out, Jordan Faison running a slant, maybe it's Malachi Fields just running a curl. Like, you have options there because Notre Dame has real threats on the outside who can do different things. That's where Eli Raridan comes in. That's if the defense puts 7 in the box. If they decide to go light and they put in 5 or 6 to try to account for all the wide receivers on the outside, then you just run the ball. Because Notre Dame should be able to win if it's 5-on-5 in the run front, right? Like 5 blockers versus 5 defenders, or if it's even 6-on-6 in the run front. If it's hat-on-hat, and if it's even across the board, you should have confidence that your offensive line is going to be able to create a hole for either Love or Price to get that 1 yard. But that's not what Notre Dame has been doing. They have been stubborn, and it feels like they're trying to prove a point by bringing in all the tight ends, running a bunch formation, and saying, it doesn't matter how many people you stack in the box, we're going to run through you anyway. Like, that might have worked with Riley Leonard at quarterback, right? When he just had an unbelievable knack of getting that yard because he was 6'4", he's big, he's a great athlete, and he just had just a great contact balance and a sense of where to go in those type of situations. But that's just not working with this group. That's fine. You have a quarterback whose superpower might be his football IQ, so let him decide what you need to do based on what the defense gives him. Because I think if you are running with Jeremiah Love in a light box, you're going to get that 1 yard every time. You just got to stop inviting more people into the box. To me, I think it's that simple, and I do think we're going to see big changes in this regard after the bye week, after Notre Dame has some time to do some self-scout. All right, coming up next, the biggest difference between Marcus Freeman today and when he was hired, plus a look at how this roster is setting up for 2026 and beyond. Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward is Jadarian Price's kickoff return for a touchdown against USC to take the lead in the third quarter. The team needed a spark, and Price came through. USC had a bunch of momentum after a long TD pass to Jacoby Lane, but then Jadarian Price punched right back with an even bigger touchdown of his own to put the Irish up by 3, and they never looked back. That's what keeps fans and players alike moving forward, always chasing the next great moment. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, our next question comes from @Nathan Litwiller. How have you noticed Marcus Freeman change from year 1 as a head coach to today? Well, there's a few things. His hairline looks different. It's gone forward as opposed to backward. His teeth look different too. He's got sharp-looking teeth. Might be veneers, but who am I to judge? But I don't think that's what you're asking about, Nathan. I think you're asking about Marcus Freeman as a head coach and his demeanor and all that good stuff. Well, I think Marcus Freeman is a lot more comfortable in his own skin today than he was at the beginning because he was a very young coach. And I feel like when you're a young coach who is not impressionable, but someone who is eager to learn so many things from so many different people, you're trying to combine all of that into one. It didn't feel like he was trying to be the best version of himself back then, which is totally expected, right? He got a very, very big job at a young age. That's not to say that he didn't deserve it. I think he absolutely did, and he's proven to be the right man for the job. But now it's not just about trying to take all these different things from so many different people. Marcus understands what he needs to do and what makes him the best head coach. And he can still learn things, right? He can still pick up on ideas and different things and different approaches and different lessons that other coaches have taught him, but he's doing it in his own way. And that's critical because you need a coach who is authentic, and Marcus Freeman is very authentic. That's why so many people like him, and it's such a contrast from the guy before him, right? But another big thing about Marcus Freeman is he's a lot more focused on the process now, and we started to see that last year as well. When Marcus Freeman was first hired, he was talking big goals, national championship, right? That was the only thing that he really talked about. But if your only thought is national championship, you're sort of forgetting about all the very important steps necessary in order to get there. And I think that's why Notre Dame lost to Marshall in his first year as the head coach, because they put everything into that Ohio State game in the season opener. They didn't really have that much of a shot to begin with, but they hung tough. They were leading going into the fourth quarter. Ohio State ends up running away with it, and then they just did not apply the same intensity, the same attention to detail, the same effort into that game against Marshall, and then they end up losing at home in Marcus Freeman's first home game as a head coach. Now he's all about process, and now you hear the same things from him all the time, talking about the team needing to reach their full potential, staying in the moment, delayed gratification, team glory, all of that good stuff. It might sound boring, but that's how Nick Saban talked. That's how all the great coaches talk. That's how they work. That's how they approach every single day. Because Nick Saban genuinely did not love winning as much as he loved the process that led to winning. That's what made him great. He loved the process more than anyone, to the point where it's almost psychotic, right? Like he'd win a national championship, and then he legitimately complained to his staff that it was unfortunate that they won the national championship because that meant they had to spend more time preparing for that game and not enough time recruiting. Like he was just a different cat, and that's why he ended up winning so much and building Alabama into what it was. And I feel like you're starting to see that more and more with Marcus. Of course, Marcus is going to appreciate the wins along the way, but he's so much more focused on the process, and he's resisting complacency. That's another trait that made Nick Saban great. No matter how good they got, he was always trying to get better. And I see that in Marcus Freeman. He's not happy with what they did last year, making it to the national championship. He wants more. He's recruiting harder. He's recruiting better prospects. He's bringing in more talent. And on the sideline, he's way more willing to rip into an official or even a player on his own team. I remember last year when he was just laying into Adon Schuler because Adon got a unsportsmanlike penalty. And I was like, damn, I have not seen Marcus act like that during a game, even though we all knew that he acted like that in practice. He also has the pulse of his team. He knows when they need to be hyped up, like how he was coming out of the tunnel against USC. You could tell just how ready to go he was in that moment. He got his team ready. Obviously, the big moment last year against Texas A&M in the season opener when he was yelling at his team, he was yelling at the crowd, he was yelling at everyone. But then there are times where he takes a more subdued approach, and that works too. So I think he's just grown so much in 4 years. It's honestly crazy to think about how good he can be after a decade or two as a head coach. So his future is really bright. All right. At Pete Trotsky 3599, what are the chances Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price stick around next year? If not, who will replace them, and how good could that group be in 2026? There is a 0% chance Jeremiah Love comes back, and that number for Jadarian Price is getting closer to 0% as well. At this point, Jadarian Price might be running back number 2 in the NFL draft behind Jeremiah Love. That is crazy. I don't even know the last time that's happened. I don't know if that's ever happened where one team had the first and second running backs drafted in the NFL draft. Mel Kiper had him as running back number 3 in his latest mock draft. Now, granted, it is October. A lot could change between now and the actual NFL draft, but I am one to believe that Jadarian Price is going to do just fine at the combine and all the testing numbers. So Price's stock can only go up. I think it has a cap, right? Because Jeremiah Love is going to be number 1 unless he gets hurt or anything like that. But for Jadarian Price, even if he were to come back, I understand he would get a big on NIL bag and all that. But at this point, he should be chasing his second contract in the NFL because he's going to make a good amount of money if he gets drafted RB2 or RB3 or anywhere close to that. But the real money is the second contract, right? Like Kyren Williams, for example. He just signed a 3-year, $33 million deal with the Rams this past offseason for his second contract. Like, there are no college teams offering $11 million a year for a running back. So that is what Jadarian Price should be striving for. And the longer that Price stays in college, the more hits he's going to take, especially as the lead back next year. And that could mean less money for him down the road. I mean, we can't forget this guy tore his Achilles tendon his freshman season at Notre Dame. So that's a lingering injury. Not to say that it's going to affect his draft stock, but he already understands the pain and the reality of a serious injury like that. And the better he plays this year, the more likely he's gone, and that's fine. You want him to be playing his absolute best. You want him to have a bunch of long touchdown runs in the college football playoff, all that good stuff. Now, let's assume Price and Love leave, right? That leaves Nolan James Jr., Aeneas Williams, and Kedron Young. Notice how I led with Nolan James Jr., the true freshman. The staff loves him. Man, we talked about him a lot in fall camp to the point where it felt like he might be RB3. Especially after Aeneas Williams hurt his elbow during camp. But really, the staff is that high on him that Nolan James Jr. could be 1 or 2 in the running back room. You also have Kedron Young, who's coming back off an ACL tear that he suffered in fall camp. And I think Nolan James, Aeneas Williams, and Kedron Young all have a ton of potential. Kedron Young is a little bit older, but we never really know with guys after they come back from an ACL injury, especially one who's going to be carrying the ball. So I still think Kedron Young has a bright future, but I don't know what his expectations are for next year. And I think Aeneas Williams was really productive for Notre Dame last year, but the fact that he's not getting on the field at all this year, I'm sure it frustrates him. I don't know if he's going to look elsewhere after the season and go in the transfer portal. I'm sure Notre Dame would love to have him because I think if you have Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, and Nolan James Jr., and then the true freshmen who are coming in, Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton, 2 guys who are just outside the top 100, they look very talented too. So you would have 5 really good running backs in the room. But look, Notre Dame is going to be thinking national championship or bust next season. It's going to be the second year of CJ Carr as the starter. They're going to have potentially their entire offensive line back. They're going to have Jane Greathouse. They're going to have Jordan Faison. They're probably going to go out and get some really talented wide receivers in the portal because which wide receiver would not want to catch passes from CJ Carr next year, right? So they could get another Malachi Fields or maybe even someone better. And then defensively, you're going to get Drake Bowen back. You're going to get KVA. You're going to get Leonard Moore, maybe even Adon Schuler. Who knows what Boubacar Traore is going to do? So next year, I mean, I know we're all excited about this year, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but like that team and that schedule next year, that's a national championship or bust type of season. And the reason I bring that up is Notre Dame is not going to be complacent. They're not going to be content with just having like a pretty good running back. It would not shock me if Notre Dame went into the portal to try to get a really, really, really talented running back. And I know that it's not very often where a super talented running back transfers, but how often does arguably the best position in all of college football open up? Because after seeing what Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have done for Notre Dame this season, any running back is going to want to be a part of this offense and any top recruit. That's why 5-star Kamon Spell, the guy who just decommitted from Penn State, might end up at Notre Dame. Because if you're a really good running back, you see how well Notre Dame runs the ball, you're going to want to be a part of that, especially next year with everything they've got going for them. So may I mention a name that Notre Dame might go after? What about Hollywood Smothers, the running back for NC State? I know that Notre Dame shut him down, but he is a very dynamic player, and he would fit the mold, right? ACC guy, playing for a team that's not very good, doesn't have a very bright future, has proven that he's talented. Like, imagine Hollywood Smothers in this offense. Again, if your only experience with Hollywood Smothers is the Notre Dame game, that's not going to excite you, but I swear, watch his other games when he's not going against a defense as good as Notre Dame's, where the only thing that they're focused on is him. That guy can go, right? So if you put him on a Notre Dame offense with all these other playmakers, I'm telling you, he could be very dynamic. I'm just putting it out there. It's still October 23rd. Not suggesting the Notre Dame tamp or anything, but it's going to be an option. All right, next up, Jeff Melsheimer. Where does Texas native Jadarian Price, shout out, rank among Notre Dame running backs in the last 25 years? Whew. This is tough. So let's go through his competition based on the all-time rushing leaders at Notre Dame. So Darius Walker is 4th all-time in rushing yards. That surprised me, but I guess it makes sense because he was a lead back for 3 years during the Charlie Weiss era when they had a really high-powered offense. Josh Adams is 5th all-time, and then you got guys like Julius Jones, Sierra Wood, Audric Esme, Jeremiah Love, Kyren Williams, Armando Allen, Tarian Folson, Dexter Williams. They are all in front of Jadarian Price right now. In terms of all-time production at Notre Dame, most rushing yards, most touchdowns, all that, I think Price is probably going to finish behind Audric, maybe even Kyron as well, but ahead of everyone else like Armando Allen, Tarian, and Dex. Price has just over 1,500 career rushing yards. Kyron had 2,153. But if we're talking about pure talent, that's tough, man. I think I'm putting Love at one. That's easy, right? I think Kyron Williams is right there behind him because Kyron had an awesome offensive line in 2020, but a terrible one in 2021. He was carrying that offense throughout much of that season with a terrible offensive line. He still ran for over 1,000 yards that year, so I think if he had a better offensive line, he could have put up insane numbers when he was in college, plus what he's doing in the NFL. So I would go Jeremiah Love 1, Kyron Williams 2, and then at 3, either Julius Jones or Audric Esme. I feel like Julius Jones is very underrated just because it's been such a long time. But then I think Jadarian Price is right there. Like, I would take Jadarian Price over Josh Adams. I would take Jadarian Price over, Allen, Folson, all those guys. So he keeps working his way up there, man, and I can't believe it. Like, I knew he was good going into the season, but he has taken his game to a whole nother level, and this Notre Dame offense is just so fun to watch with Love and Price, two all-time great running backs on the same team and in the same backfield. All right, we still got a few more questions left, and coming up, who Notre Dame fans should root for the rest of the way in my favorite Notre Dame football memory ever. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. So for Notre Dame, Jeremiah Love obviously delivered for the Irish in their win over USC. Love rushed for 228 yards, added 37 rushing yards, and he had the most rushing yards by a Notre Dame running back in the history of Notre Dame Stadium. He set the tone from the jump and never took his foot off the gas. He ran through the Trojan front seven all game long, and when the pressure was on, Love came through. No hesitation, no delay. And just like Jeremiah Love delivers for Notre Dame, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. All right, we finally got back in the win column last night. Chargers just dominating the Vikings. We had the Chargers minus 3.5 on the show. So who are we looking at for Sunday? Well, I made the colossal mistake of picking the Miami Dolphins to cover against the Cleveland Browns. Part of it was like emotional hedging, right? Because the Browns are my team, but I'm very apathetic towards them. But watching them just completely give up in Cleveland has me thinking they're done. They're in poop town, as SVP would call it. So I'm taking the Falcons minus 7.5 against the Dolphins on Sunday. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, we have 3 questions left in today's mailbag, and we always like to save the fun ones for last. At Mitch Matt Irish says, do you ever recall a time in your life where Notre Dame was in serious contention with this many 5-star caliber targets? Based on these visitor lists, the class of 2026 might only be scratching the surface. So they were in on a bunch of guys in the class of 2013 after the national championship. That's when they got Jalen Smith, right? And it felt like Notre Dame was all the way back. Jalen Smith was from Fort Wayne, so they had to get him, but that was a big-time get because Ohio State really wanted him. And they had Max Redfield in that class, who was a 5-star, borderline 5-star. They had other guys, too. So there have been times where they had a bunch of 5-star guys where they were close to him, but not quite like this, not in consecutive classes, because Notre Dame has a terrific class in 2026 with the guys they have there at the top. I mean, they've got Rodney Dunham. They've got the tight end, Ian Premer. They've got Kari Adams, like guys who are right there, either 5 stars or borderline 5 stars. Joey O'Brien is right up there as well. And then to have the class like that and then follow it up with what Notre Dame could have in 2027. I mean, 5-star running back Kamon Spell could commit to Notre Dame. They also got a commitment this week from 4-star offensive lineman James Halter. Haven't talked about him much on the show just because we've been so focused on the actual football stuff in the season. But we did have Steve Wilfong, the national recruiting guy for On3. I mean, he's probably the biggest name in the entire industry, so that was a big get for the show. And he basically said James Halter was going to commit to Notre Dame here in the near future, which is why we didn't spend too much additional time on him on the show after he committed, but that's a big time get, and I think it's only the beginning. I think he is the first of many guys who are going to commit to Notre Dame here soon during the season. And as we saw last season, or this past summer, I should say, Notre Dame likes to set up their timeline so they go really all in on guys in the spring and then in the summer. That's when they try to land commitments. That's when they're getting guys on campus. They have these orchestrated visits where they're getting all the attention. Because during a football weekend, like, it's really cool for these guys to get on campus, experience everything, but the coaches are going to be focused on, winning the actual game and everything that goes into that. So the way that Notre Dame kind of structures all of this, it's all setting up the right way. They're in on the right guys. They're going after some big name targets, and Notre Dame they have all the right things going for them right now. They're winning on the field. They have a head coach who cares so much about recruiting, and they have money to spend. When you have those three things, you're going to get a lot of top recruits, and that's exactly what Notre Dame has been doing lately. All right, at Jamie Doug Knisley, this is a real tag. It's from YouTube, and sometimes the YouTube auto-generated tags are kind of all over the place, but Jamie asked, what's your all-time favorite Notre Dame football moment? And I love this question because it sent me down a rabbit hole. I was watching stuff on YouTube, just reliving so many great moments, right? Because, look, for as much as we complain, right, about all the losses as a Notre Dame fan, and look, there have been plenty. There are all kinds of painful moments I can remember. I mean, hell, in September when Notre Dame lost at Texas A&M, when I was in that crowd, that was so painful to watch Notre Dame lose on another last-second touchdown. Like, there have been a lot of painful losses, but there have also been a lot of great moments, especially last year, right? There were so many great moments last year. Even that win against Texas A&M was awesome, and then the run in the playoff, the win over USC, all that stuff. But if I'm trying to pick my all-time favorite, it's really, really hard. I would say a couple stick out to me. When Notre Dame beat USC in 2012 to go to the national championship, that was unbelievable. I was just going crazy in my living room with my family, knowing that Notre Dame was going to play in the national championship game. Like, that felt impossible my whole life. And really, at the start of the 2012 season, no one was talking about Notre Dame going to the national championship. So the fact that they did it, the fact that they beat USC, and it was like a continuation of the weekend prior when I was actually at the Notre Dame-Wake Forest game. They win that game. They end up becoming the top-ranked team by the end of the night because who lost that day? Oregon lost, and then Baylor beat Kansas State, right? Looking back, I wish Baylor did not beat Kansas State. Notre Dame would probably have a national championship, but that's neither here nor there. I think when Riley Leonard scored that first touchdown against Ohio State, Notre Dame took a lead, and just the way that they did it, that moment sent chills down my spine because it felt like it was all real. It was all going to happen there for a brief, fleeting moment before Ohio State went on their run. But in that moment, man, in the national championship, to just punch Ohio State in the mouth on that opening series was just awesome. And Jeremiah Love's touchdown run against Indiana felt surreal because it was happening right in front of me, and there was so much build up to that moment. The college football playoff, Notre Dame had made it. Everything after like the NIU loss, it's sort of gone away, and you're playing Cignetti and the IU fans who talked so much trash going into that game. And then for Jeremiah Love to score that touchdown, I mean, it also felt like it was lasting for 15 seconds long because he's going 98 yards, and just the euphoria in the crowd was just amazing. And once he did that, you just knew Notre Dame was going to win. But if I had to pick one moment, just in terms of pure joy, I'm going to have to go to 2006 when Jeff Samardzija scored the game winner against UCLA, because I was 10 years old, and the only thing I really cared about was Notre Dame football, and Brady Quinn and Jeff Samardzija, and those guys were like superheroes to me. I had no responsibilities, right, in the real world. That was my world. Notre Dame football was my world back then, and to be able to see a game winner like that, I had never seen something like that on TV or in person before. So for Quinn to connect with Samardzija like that, at one point after Samardzija scored, my dad had to lift me up because I was so small. I couldn't really see because of all the adults around me. But just in terms of pure just unadulterated joy. That's got to be up there for me. But there's a lot more, man. I mean, the win over Georgia when Donovan Hines got the sack and you realized that Notre Dame had finally done it. They had finally beaten the top SEC team. They had gotten over the hump, all that stuff like that. That's all up there. There's so many great moments from last year. The Penn State game. Like, there's a lot of really great moments, but if just from personal experience where I was at in my life, I'm sure that mine are going to be different than yours. But I would encourage you to think about the same question here, because I think you're going to be in a good mood for like the next hour. All right, we're going to close out with one that's pretty prevalent to the weekend. This one is from @MattShot4402. What is the Notre Dame fans' rooting guide for the rest of the season? Obviously, we want everyone on Notre Dame's schedule to do well, but especially Miami, A&M, and USC. So yeah, Matt, you're right. Obviously, you got to root for Miami, you got to root for Texas A&M, and got to root for USC, as painful as that may be. But the real focus here is not the teams necessarily, other than the ones that Notre Dame played. We need to be worried about how many teams get in per league. Notre Dame needs the Big Ten to get 3 teams in the college football playoff, and that looks pretty set. It's going to be Ohio State, it's going to be Indiana, it's going to be Oregon. Penn State was going to be the 4th team before they just completely fell off the rails. So after the Big Ten, you only want one for the Big 12, whoever is the Big 12 champ, and right now they've got BYU and Texas Tech. So you want only the Big 12 champ to get in. You don't want another one to sneak in there as well. Even though BYU got that win over Utah and Texas Tech just lost to Arizona State, I think Texas Tech is going to end up winning the Big 12. So you want one of those two to sort of cancel each other out. And then in the SEC, they're probably going to be 4. Actually, they're probably going to be 5, to be honest with you, because they have 7 teams with only 1 loss and a couple teams with 2 losses. And the SEC it's interesting this year because they don't have like the truly elite team, but they have a bunch of good teams like Alabama, like Georgia. Who else is up there? Vanderbilt, you got to mention them now, right? Like, they're a good team. Texas A&M, obviously. So they have a bunch of really good teams. They might not have the elite team. So the real tricky one is the ACC. Here's why. Miami losing to Louisville last weekend just really complicates things, because right now Miami is 3rd in the ACC. If Virginia and Georgia Tech win out, then they will make the ACC championship, and Miami will be on the outside. So even if Miami finishes 11-1, they won't even make the ACC championship if Virginia and Georgia Tech win out. If that happens, then one of them is going to get in, right? Virginia or Georgia Tech. And I don't think the committee is going to punish the loser of that game to the point where they wouldn't make the college football playoff, because that would set a really bad precedent. That would basically be them admitting that conference championship games don't matter. So then the ACC could have 3 teams in the league. And I don't want a situation where Notre Dame is being compared to Miami for a playoff spot, because Miami has the head-to-head even if it was week 1. Now, if Miami had 2 losses, maybe Notre Dame would be in a better spot. But that is a tricky situation that you want to avoid. For the SEC teams, you just got to root for carnage outside of Texas A&M, honestly. But the ACC thing is where it could be tricky. But again, it's October 24th. We have got a long way to go before we really need to stress about any of this stuff. But that is one thing to keep an eye out for. Keep an eye out for the ACC. Root for carnage there. And then, I mean, Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon, that seems like a lock at this point. But other than that, look, enjoy the games. It's going to be a great weekend of college football. Should be a stress-free Saturday for all of you because Notre Dame doesn't have a game. Real interesting matchups like LSU, Texas A&M. Can't wait for that one. Vandy, Mizzou. Who knew that would be a big deal? I like Mizzou in that game, by the way. I know that everyone's been on Vandy lately, but now that game day's there, they're going to have all this hype. They're going to have all these distractions in the world. I think Mizzou gets them in an upset. But you know what? We're going to leave you on that note. That is going to do it for today's Locked On Irish. Thank you so much for making this your first watch or listen of the day, and for tuning in all week long during the bye week. Love celebrating the USC win and just talking Notre Dame football with you. And before you head out and get a head start on your weekend, please subscribe on YouTube. Follow along wherever you get your podcasts. There's no game this weekend, so obviously no instant reaction episode on Saturday. But you know what? I'm going to be back on Sunday for another edition of Sunday Night Live at 8 p.m. Eastern after the afternoon slate of NFL games before the primetime game. It's going to be live in the Locked On Irish YouTube channel. Come join, hang out. It's pretty laid back, taking questions from the chat. We'll talk about the weekend of college football, results from the weekend, what Notre Dame has left on the schedule, all that good stuff. We've been getting more and more people in the live show as of late, and it's been a lot of fun. So until then, enjoy the bye week and go Irish.